Namaste. Spirituality is indeed the master key of the human of Indian thought. Sri Aurobindo reveals to us in Foundations of Indian Culture. But this spirituality is of Indian thought and culture is a many-sided, vast, inclusive spirituality. It is not a spirituality of a narrow sect, though many sects have sprung from it. It's not a cult, though many cults have emerged from it. It's not just a set of rituals, practices, etc. At its core, it's a seeking, and this seeking is embedded in a threefold formula, and that formula is Satyam, Ritam, Brahatam. The seekers were seeking for truth. And what truth? Not the truth of the senses, because there is nothing to seek there. Because if truth is in the domain of the senses, then, well, all of us are living in the truth. But the first premise of spirituality is that what the senses weave is appearances. Not even the truth of the mind, because what we understand by the mind is conditioned by our own mindset, preferences, viewpoints, opinions, emotions. All these things come and mix up. And the mind therefore cannot ever fully understand. Mind sees a small section and not the totality. So they sought a truth which transcended the formulas of the mind, just as mind transcends the first formula of the senses. And this truth was not a narrow point. This is truth and this is not truth. So this truth had to be vast, because all life had to be based on this truth. It was not truth which was up in the sky, whereas the earth, everything, its core and base was truth. So it was a vast truth they sought. Satyam, Ritam, Brahatam. That is Brahatam and Ritam. Ritam is literally, now there are many things. This is a key to Indian thought, which very often is not much spoken about. Well, everything is in essence God, we often say. Everything is in its essence divine. So then, how do we act in life? So to act in life, we have to understand the Indian idea of rhythm. So rhythm, you have an English word corresponding to it, rhythm. So, so rhythm literally means the right arrangement of things according to the divine law which has been ordained. So otherwise there will be chaos. Everything is same. So I often use this example. So in a house, when you enter, you leave these shoes outside generally and change into the house chappals. And supposing you have to arrange shoes and books and clothes in one single cupboard. So how would we arrange it? Shoes on the top shelf? Books on the bottom shelf? No, isn't it? Isn't it very interesting that to understand it, you have to do nothing, you don't have to read a book. Our own very body can give us the clue. So I was very surprised when I had gone in one of the conferences in US, and my room partner came and opened the suitcase, took out a pair of shoes, first thing on the bed. So I said, this is practice of equanimity. So what, if you look at the human body, there you will see the rith. The feet are below. They are supporting you. It's not that ki shoes may divine nahi. You can argue, yes, of course there is divine in shoes. Who said there is no divine in shoes? But the place of the divine in the shoes is the feet. So there the feet goes. And then you have, if you look at it, the abdomen and all these things connected to various processes inside is the Jal Tattva. So you put it in the next shelf. And then comes the heart. And then comes the head. So on top you keep the books, you keep your dresses, you keep things which are dear to you, favorite to you, in whatever way. So this is how the human body is arranged. And if you look at this human body's arrangement, it's very interesting. So bones, heavy dense bones which represents the strong, grossest Prithvi Tattva, are in the legs and the feet. And then you have the Jala Tattva, this abdomen all full of, Jala Tattva. And then you have the Agni and the Vayu expressing right up to the mouth, and then you have the space. The human body is also arranged like that. And therefore, they also had created a fourfold social order, which later on degenerated. So it was things which are connected intimately with the physical, or people connected with the physical life. Then there was a humanity connected with the vital life, which means they were engaged in production, engaged in creating things, or the higher vital in defending, etc. And then there were things which were pertaining to knowledge. So that's how they created a fourfold social order. It should have broken, because there was a confusion. People started looking at it purely by heredity, and so it broke, because something new has to come. But it was based on a principle, and that principle continues to remain active. Why it remains active? Because there is a hierarchy in terms of human evolution. Wherever there is manifestation, there will be hierarchy. Just can't help it. Why? Because manifestation is in space and time. So there will be things which will come initially, then things will come later. After all, the entire evolutionary journey is a hierarchy. So there will be layers of humanity. If we take in the principle of rebirth, there will be a layer of humanity which is early humanity, which is only concerned with outer things. It cannot understand anything except through the physical. We were talking about the hierarchy of yoga systems. Then there is a layer of humanity which is only engaged or largely engaged in one's own interests, desires, and its satisfactions. There is a hierarchy, layer of humanity which wants to go still further. It is ambitious. So it wants to conquer distant lands, wide lands. The same thing, ambition, can turn inward and conquest of a different kind. And there is a layer of humanity at the end, when we have gone through this entire journey, it engages in what we are here for. Is there anything at all at the base of things? It's a seeker of knowledge. So this was the hierarchy. And this hierarchy we see everywhere in nature. This idea that because God is in all, which is a truth, therefore everything can be mixed together. It is like saying that, okay, you take a basket, you go to, a place, take this as a huge supermarket, and you put apples, you put shoes, you put roses, you put clothes, everything together, and make a big basket. Still you will have to arrange when you bring it home. So this arrangement of things created this idea of hierarchy existed in India. And at the same time, there has to be a right place for everything. So sometimes it can be very annoying to the youth. That's one thing, हर चीज अपनी जगह पर रखनी है. But at the same time, it is to be understood that why it is to be kept. It's to create order. That's all. Everything in its own season, everything in its own time, everything in its own place. Now when this becomes very rigid, then it becomes very difficult to manage and handle. But if we understand the principle behind it, then we understand it very well, that everything, there was a season for everything, there was a time for everything. And at the same time, it's also true that the old order is now gone. But we must understand it, because what is going to come in its place is something very new. But it will contain elements of all those things. The truth cannot be lost, and it will bring out these truths in a different way altogether. So this is how we have. Now this hierarchy did not mean that as we understand today. Our hierarchy is based on ego. Meaning thereby, if somebody is elder, we must respect, we must touch the feet, etc. This come much later. But if you read the Indian stories, it was never like that. Nachiketa's story we were referring yesterday. It is Nachiketa who is now well known in Indian thought. Nachiketa is the one on whose name the fire of aspiration has been named as Nachiketa's Agni. But hardly anybody remembers what was the name of his father. So it was a hierarchy based on ultimately it was an inner hierarchy. Same thing we see in the story of Satyakam Jabali, where we understand how human how the ethics within the Indian society operated. So, ethics in Indian society was not a set of do's and don'ts. It was not a black and white. Moral life is like that. It creates a set of rules, largely social rules with a religious sanction, based on which we act and we judge people. But in Indian society, in ancient India, it was much more intrinsic, subtle, and beautiful. And I believe that one day it will manifest. And that was called Dharma. Dharma had nothing to do with all the rituals that we do. Religion, it's not an equivalent of religion. So, what really is Dharma? So, we can take this story of Satyakam Jabali. So, Satyakam is born, he knows his mother is Jabali. And at the age of 5, this young little child says, I want to go to the best school. The best school where they taught Brahma Vidya. That was the best school. Best school was not based on what degree, what job you will get, but where Brahma Vidya could be taught. There were very few masters who could teach that. So he got a fancy to it. I want to go there and enroll myself. So he goes there and asks the Guru, Gautam, that I want to learn Brahma Vidya. So he says, okay, but another interesting aspect of Indian thought was Adhikar Bhed, which sprang from this same truth. We'll talk about it as it comes. So he says, yes, but not everybody can enroll himself into this school. So, okay, what is required? Is it a lot of money? He said, no, it's not about money, but I need to know your lineage. Do you come from a family which is so high that from these seeds of heredity itself, you can say that, well, here is somebody who is capable of engaging in Brahma Vidya. Now, people may say today that, what has heredity got to do with it? You see, Indian thought took into account the truth of heredity. Heredity has to do with our physical bearing. It has to do with our, inner psychological makeup. These are simple facts which today we talk about it in psychology and nobody says you are. But this heredity had to be understood and used rightly. It was not to condemn anybody. It was understood, taken into account. So he says, who is your father? But now see, what is the twist of this story? Let me know who is your father and I'll enroll you or not enroll you depending on whether you are an adhikari or not. So the boy goes and asks his mother, Mother, since childhood, I haven't seen my dad. You never told me about him. But I need to know because they won't take me in the school. So the mother replies, well, my son, well-meaning is your teacher. This much I know that I am your mother. And then she pauses. Then she says, but I've been working as a maid in several houses. I don't exactly know who your father is. Now look at the subtlety. Only in French films, modern French films, you can see this kind of subtle expression. Subtle expression. And this is very ancient tale. She doesn't say anything more. She says, I don't know who your father is because I was serving many masters as a maid. That's all. And the boy goes and expresses the same thing to the Rishi. I don't know who my father is. My mother doesn't know it. But this she knows that she is my mother. And the Rishi replies, well said. If such a lady is your mother who has such a courage, then I must say you are ready to be enrolled in the school. Now just look at this story and try to understand what kind of dharma, how it was conceived in Indian thought. It was not conceived the way we understand today, a set of right, wrong, moral, but something very, very different. So what was the dharma? It was something intrinsic. This lady was a maid. But in terms of dharma, she was very high up the scale. She had the courage to express truth. Even though this truth was not very pleasant, she tried to shield the child from that, but a time came when she expressed it. And the Rishi really appreciated it. This is our own story. It's not a made-up story. Another story, if this story seems, is just to understand how dharma operated. So, some time back, now things are changing. If a boy and girl without consent of parents, ran away. Or without running away, they have to run away because they won't get a consent. But just got married. No parental consent, nothing. What is it regarded as? European society, Victorian morality. Now look at ancient Indian thought. So we know the story of Shakuntala and Dushyant. So Shakuntala is brought up in an ashram. She herself, nobody knows her parentage. I mean, of course, Vishwamitra and Menaka and both walk away. He is a rishi, she is a apsara. So they both vanish. And she is brought up below a tree. And that tree she's guarded by the Shakun Pakshi. So she becomes Shakuntala. And then she is, brought up in the ashram of the rishi, Kanva rishi. And, one day when nobody is around, King Dushyant forgets the way, comes to the ashram. He meets this girl, Shakuntala, and they fall in love. Whatever happens in the course of a few hours, and then he goes away. And she conceives. Now, when the rishi comes back, what would be the reaction of a sage? He says, you have not done anything wrong because it is an act of love under which you did. Whatever you did, it was not lust or blind, this thing. He sees the truth. He says, okay, bring up this child. The man has told her that, well, I am doing with you what is known as Gandharva. Gandharva was a marriage where there was no consent of parents. Very few people know this is documented as one of the valid marriages in the Vedic system. Gandharva. Parents have not consented. Nobody knows. Son is the witness. That's all. So, the child is conceived and the child is born, but he doesn't come back. And Kanv Rishi tells her, go back and claim the rightful share. And she goes and claims it. So, how to understand this if we try to put things into a very rigid slot of right and wrong? That's not how they looked at it. So, one has to understand the Indian ethos, the Indian stories, the Indian thought of those days, one has to understand Dharma. So, Dharma was not a set of doctrinal rules of life, because the Indian rishis knew long back that there are no such doctrinal rules through which life operates. The more rules you make, the more people find ways to escape from the rule, find ways out of the rule. So what was the principle? Yet there must be a principle to guide our actions. What should be the principle? So the principle was, Dharma meant three things. One is that which holds you. It comes from the root dhra. Dharan karta hai. Dharti, dharana, they all come from the same root. So dharma is at its core what holds you. So in our life we can see in our actions, what has impelled me from the core? Is it lust? Is it love? Is it pleasure? Is it good? Is it some other movement? So what is at my core? That is what is important. So that which holds. First thing is that. So it had three levels at which Dharma was understood. What holds us at the base, and what is at the base is truth. So according to Indian thought, this entire creation is manifesting from a base of truth. So that is Dharma. So then it doesn't give us much clue about how to act. Truth is something which is so vast that rishis took years of sustained tapasya to discover what is truth. So, what about our everyday life? Now, the goal is also truth, the base is also truth. So, Dharma meant all that helps you to move towards the truth. And all that took you away from the truth was adharma. So, in Indian thought, it was not papa and punya, it was dharma and adharma. So what helped you to move toward the truth itself depended on the stage of progress. So there was something called as swadharma, something called as yuga dharma. And then the dharma changed according to the stage of your life. For a child, a way of action is fine. For youth, something else. middle-aged and elderly. So there was a different setup. So dharma was not what will help you to move toward the truth and what will not, depended a lot on the stage of progress. So for instance, a thief goes into a temple as the story is told, and there is a problem, there is a financial problem in the house, and he steals some jewelry which is there, which people have offered, jewelry of the Lord, and he takes it away and then he sells it, and he starts, as the story goes, his wife is very happy and they all start building a house. And one day his wife meets the priest's wife, and she says, how come behan tum, this is very dangerous question. When people ask, ye kaise hua aapki zindagi mein? Be careful, don't just start. How come you have suddenly become so rich overnight? And you can't keep things. नहीं वो भगवान की लीला है, भगवान की कृपा है. So कृपा कैसे आई? So she says that, well, see, after all, we didn't have any money. So who will give us money? God will give us money. So my husband went and stole some of the jewelry. So God has given us money. That was the logic. So, okay, fine. But then she says, very good, everything fine. But she comes and tells her husband, see, you have been a priest living all your life in this way. And look at our own house. This person has understood the Shastras rightly. God gives. What will God do with all the jewelry? He picked up a little for his home. What's wrong with it? So he said, don't say such things. No, just a little. People come and offer so much. You have to just pick up a little bit and see. I'm not saying build a big house like him, but at least a little bit. So he hesitates a lot, but after all, Prakriti is hold over Purusha. So finally, he goes one day and says, Lord, this is the logic, picks up something, some gold, and brings it and says, okay, you can use it. And as the story goes, that he's tormented after that, tormented for days and weeks and months. And then the Lord appears and says, why I am under torment, whereas I have done exactly the same thing that the other person has done. And then he says, yes, because see, he was genuine, he was poor, he had no aim in life except cutting wood or something and earning the livelihood, running the family. But you are a priest. Your goal cannot be the same. Your goal is to serve the Lord. So, from your consciousness point of view, this karma is much, much worse than somebody else who is not awakened at all. So he picked up and I said, okay, you make... now this is not an excuse to actually, do such things under a so-called spurious need, etc. But it is to understand that dharma has to do with the state of consciousness in which one is caught. So there is a state of consciousness in which certain things happen, or you can do things like a warrior killing on the battlefield. Now, just to take an example, if we make a rule book of life, we will say killing is bad, isn't it? Non-violence is good, violence is bad. But violence exists as a tendency in human nature. So look at the Indian thought, what it did. It said, direct it where it should be directed. So there was the Kshatriya clan. Kshatriya's clan were very aggressive, and they meant to be so. But they directed this aggression towards defending the righteous cause, defending the poor, defending the downtrodden, defending those who needed to be defended. And in that they could kill in that process. So if you look at it, of course today we understand that if you make non-violence an absolute principle, then how do you have an army at all? And if you don't have an army, you will be run over by... So violence also found a place in Indian thought. Violence is, of course, a very extreme form. There is no doubt about it. It's, if at all we want to put it on one side is unity, on the other side, it's an extreme force of division. Violence is not only physical, verbal, everything, but that also got channelized. So it was the dharma of the Kshatriya to raise the arms, to kill if needed, to defend those who were in distress, to defend whatever group life he belonged to. But the dharma of the Brahmin was different. A seeker of knowledge is a different thing altogether. He has to practice non-violence. Why? Because he has to transcend all aggression within him. You see, Sri Aurobindo's life, when he is in the revolutionary days, somebody had asked this question, what was his contribution? So we can touch upon that in the revolutionary movement. Well, if you see the period between 1857, the Sepoy Mutiny, and 1902, when actually things started again, which is a gap of roughly 45 years, why there is nothing? It was almost that Indians that time believed that nothing really can overthrow the British. So they had started pactizing. They started saying it's okay, let them give us some doles, we are happy with it. Give us some little rights. And the Britishers were very happy. So the revolutionary movement picked up from 1902 again. It's all historical, and that is the time when Bhagat Jatin came and met Sri Aurobindo. Jatin Nath, who was one of the fierce fighters. Anushilan Samitis were formed. In 1905, during the partition of Bengal, Sri Aurobindo completely plunged into the freedom movement. And during the next 5 years, he had laid down all the lines, 5 or 6 years, all the lines along which India will arrive at freedom, which included passive boycott, passive resistance. All these things he had already, if you really look at the charter in Vande Mataram, all the lines he had already laid down. He knew how political freedom will come. He knew that Britishers are basically, they have this streak of hypocrisy. So they don't like to be painted black. They may do black deeds, but it pricks their conscience if they are painted black. So they must have a system of justice where they show that justice is being done. He had known them very well. So this was a way that he had already devised. And when he had laid down all the lines through which India will receive freedom, he had awakened the soul of India. You see through his writings and Durga's Throat. And once he was sure that this is assured, now there is something greater for him, then he had moved away to Pondicherry. And ultimately what he had seen, the lines along which he had laid down, that eventually took place. We exactly see that. So during the freedom struggle, people asked him, what are your views about violence? So he was neither for non-violence nor he was against violence. If there is a need for armed revolt, it's perfectly justified. That was Sri Aurobindo's position. He was not inciting people to take part in armed revolt, but he saw that it is okay if that be the need of the moment to get this freedom. So he was neither for violence nor non-violence. But when Sri Aurobindo goes, and then he said something very interesting. He writes in Essays on the Gita that there is another kind of violence which we don't realize. He says when you suppress the urge, you are getting very angry and you suppress it, hold it inside. So he says it releases tremendous forces in the atmosphere and all kinds of things will come from all sides. He gives the examples of Vasist, how he had conquered this state and armies of Huns and, they came into India from every side they poured. So every time we suppress a tendency inside. So Indian thought was so deeply based on understanding human nature in all its sides, shades, complexities. And when we suppress it inside, the energy will be released. If you don't release it, it will get into the entire atmosphere. And whom it will catch, what it will do, which way it will act, it will be beyond our control. So in the Essays on the Gita also he says that sometimes it's much better to stay the arms of the slayer if need be, than to simply, become a paragon of non-violence. But at the same time, we see something very interesting about Sri Aurobindo. When, this fakir who was throwing stones tried to throw stones at Sri Aurobindo's house, dwelling place. Because, some communities nearby, they had got very ruffled. So by occult means, they planted a man who was a receiver of these kinds of energies. So that's how occult magics work. Occultism works by, usually, very few people can act directly through thought and feelings. They need to give some mediums. See how Indian thought was so deeply, it understood the way things work. So that's why this Free interchange of gift. Anybody gives anything to anyone. You see, when somebody gave some tomatoes to Pavitrada, he was in the initial days, friend means they walked together, and then when the ashram was formed, he had gone away. Then he got some tomatoes for Pavitrada or apples, I don't remember, and Pavitrada asked the mother, "Can I take it?" Mother said, "One last time." Why? Because every physical object contains the vibrations and consciousness of the giver. So many things that you understand, you understand in thought, jhuta nahi khana, kisi ka bhi. It was based on this occult understanding. You don't start exchanging anything with anyone. So he planted a medium, a human being, because otherwise it was very difficult to materialize stones. And basing this man within the ashram premises, means in the dining room, they took some workers. He started materializing stones which were targeting this boy and everybody around them. So that's a long story, and people tried, the police saw it, and people saw it nearby. Till the matter reached the mother. So when mother came to know about it, she spoke about it to Sri Aurobindo. She went into her inner vision and she saw that there are these three vital entities whom this fakir has captured, and they were throwing stones. So they came to the mother and said, well, he has caught us and we are his slaves. So we don't mind, we can become your slaves, because they have no such allegiance. So the mother asked, "What can you do for me?" He said, we can throw stones. He said, "I don't need you, thank you." Just go away. But then what happened? The magic fell back. That's the problem with all these magics. If people try these things, black magic, etc., these are not superstitions. These are very scientific things which do work. So is there in every part of the world, by the way, hexing is a very known thing. Even psychiatry, we were taught that is there a phenomena called hexing. You know what is hexing? Sounds very nice. Like, you call batura, pizza, margarita, then you like it. Maide ka batura with those toppings. So what is hexing? Anybody knows what is hexing? Everybody knows nazar lag jana? That's it. Hexing is nazar lag jana. So what is nazar lag jana? Through the eyes you transmit certain vibrations. So that's how in Indian thought restraint, how you should be, because they knew this entire occult panorama of the play of forces that are operating in creation. So, sent him away, so the black magic fell back and the fakir fell sick. He fell seriously sick. He was on deathbed. And then his wife came running to the mother that this is what has happened, he's on deathbed. And he comes and tells Sri Aurobindo. She goes and tells Sri Aurobindo. And Sri Aurobindo says, what? Death for a few stones? And he recovers. So, this violence, when it is done for something like a great cause, and see how Sri Aurobindo beautifully, in his aphorisms, how beautifully he sees every side of the same action. At one place he says, when Europeans kill, it is exigency. When Asiatics do it, it is massacre. Mark the difference. People say change is not coming. Just I was hearing our foreign minister, so beautifully he said, you people are still living in the idea of a Eurocentric world. It has changed. That's a fact. So you see this way. Another place he says that while it is good to forgive all trespasses that may have happened, it's noble. But it is not good when somebody else is involved. And even he goes on to say sometimes, if necessary, calmly avenge. So people ask, why should you calmly avenge? Why avenge if a wrong has been done to you? So avenge has to do with justice. So justice was also important, nyaya, because there are forces operating in the world. And if you allow them to have their field day, so the Mahabharata war is not just a war between two families. That's how it is painted. That's how Balaram understood. ये तो दोनों भाइयों का प्रॉब्लम है, हम क्यों बीच में पड़े? But that's not how Krishna saw it. He saw it as a war, Dharma Kshetri, Kurukshetri. It's a war of Dharma. So what was the war? If one side won, it meant the reign on over the world of types like Duryodhana, who didn't care about anything. They could drag Draupadi in the court. They were happy deceiving anyone and everyone. They had the lust, greed, ambition for kingdom, power, and everything else. So on one side is this kind of humanity. On the other side is Yudhishthir, who till the last moment is saying, it's okay, my cousins, forgive them. Arjuna even on the battlefield is saying, I know I can kill these fellows, but I don't feel like doing it. He is my grandfather, he is my guru. How can I do this? They are my cousins. And that's the time Shri Krishna gives him the secret of Dharma. So, Dharma is at once individual and collective. Collective Dharma in a collective grouping is meant to carry the march of mankind forward. I will be non-violent. Okay, fine. Your seat is booked in heaven. But because though you were capable and you didn't fight, and it led to the massacre of a whole group of humanity, it led to the reign of Adharma, that you are not bothered about. So we have this interesting story in the Trojan War. All this is important because very often we get these Indian non-violent. We hear from the most violent nations. You are non-violent, you belong to Gandhiji. We can, invade any country. So there was this, there are a number of stories which indicate these truths, that how in Indian thought we viewed these things. That Dharma and Adharma were not a set of rules. They changed, they evolved. It was a question of carrying the march of civilization forward. So in the Trojan War, there is a very interesting story. So the story is, there is this character called Achilles. So Achilles is like killing machine, literally. One word you can say. And he's also son of a goddess. And how they were sons of goddess? This is another thing people ask. What have gods and goddesses to do? Well, they are powers, forces, aspects, energies, beings who can take hold of a human being, and during the time when a child is being conceived, you say in a certain way that child of this. So we have Anjani Putra Pavan Sut Nama, Kesari Nandan, all these things. He is Anjani Sut, he is Kesari Nandan, that we understand. He is Pavan Putra, he is also Shankar Suman. How is it? So they could see simultaneously. He is no doubt Anjani Putra. He is Kesari Nandan. They are his parents. What has Pavan got to do? Pavan carried the energy of Shiva all the way to Anjani. So he is also Pavan Putra. He is also Shankar Suvan. It was Shiva's energy. When Vishnu Bhagavan had taken the Mohini Roop, he can entice even Shiva. So that energy of love, of a kind of love when flowed from Shiva, it's so precious. So Pavan carries it all the way, and there is a transplantation done, implantation, and Kesari conceived. So when you look at it, this is how they conceived. Devta ke putra the. Because they knew all the subtle forces which are working inside. So Achilles, he says, I don't want to fight, I have a family life, all this. He has a little baby who is born. So he says, I don't want to go for war. So finally he is convinced by Odysseus. King cannot convince him. He says, okay, fine, we'll go. We don't need you. And when we lose the war, then the world will point fingers at you. That here was a man who could have turned the tables, and yet he didn't do that. And then he says, okay, I'll come. And he made the difference in the entire war, if you see. Sri Aurobindo brings another dimension to it. He says later on he became a very compassionate human being. He had gone through that's why he was not willing to engage into the war. So when we look at Indian thought, it is a very complex thought. And that's why people find it very difficult to understand. They want to know, tell me what to do and what not to do. Well, life is complex. Creation is complex. In different seasons, the farmer deals differently with the soil. And if we don't take this complexity into cognizance, we will miss out how life, evolves. So, at one point of time, it is dharma to fight. At another point of time, look, when the Pandavas lost in the Dyut, in that game of dice, they could have been, that was the time, they were all fire. And they could have just decimated with the help of Krishna. Even Balram would have joined forces. This is unfair. And they would have finished the Kauravas. But what does Krishna advise them? He says, no, go to the forest. Why? That time also they could have fought. Because then it would have been a dharma. You people out of your own choice engaged with Shakuni, who is a dhurt. And you lost. True, they shouldn't have done what they did. But Yudhishthir, did you have the right to put your kingdom and your wife, all these at stake as if they were yours? They didn't belong to you. You had no right to do it. You are a Dharma Putra and you did this. Your mind has been carried away. Though a child of Dharma, you have to go through a much greater tapasya because you are a Dharma Putra and you couldn't see. You could have simply said, they are not mine. But so Krishna advises them that go and engage this period. But he knew war is coming. So he told Arjuna, gather the celestial weapons and get ready if a war comes. So you see, it was at that point of time, Krishna doesn't advise them war. Even when they come back, he tries that even if there are 5 villages. But when all measures fail, war is thrust. So there is a point where wars, battles, they become necessary. They are schools of courage. That's how the mother puts it. So they had a place for everything. This is so different from the moral science lessons, which besides were the most boring things ever. In convent school where I studied, I'm sure everywhere the same. We had to mug them up, 10 rules, all of the 10 commandments. And we used to feel so sleepy, but there were so many marks for that, So, so marks ke chalte yaad karna padta tha. I know there used to be a book, this thin book, but with so many things, even manners. How to do this, how to do that, open the door, this, that, 100 things. So life became, I almost started feeling I'm becoming a robo. These things should spring from within. Then they have a value. So this entire system of dharma, what leads us individually and collectively towards the forward march of mankind. Not just about me. What is the forward march of mankind? Where was it going? So they saw it is moving towards that which is at the base. And what is that? Satyam. And what is the truth towards which it is moving? So they described in very beautiful ways. So they used 2 words to describe that Satyam, apart from Vratam and Ritam. So nowadays we hear, Sach bada kadwa hota hai. Truth is bitter. What did the rishis say? Raso vaisaha. Satya bada meetha hota hai. Why did they say this? They were not looking at this truth, that truth, and 100 truths of appearances. The truth towards which creation is lending, that truth is not bare. That truth is full of ras. That's how the Ken Upanishad says. Because people say, oh, he is in search of truth, is okay, but what about society? So Ken Upanishad says, such a person who receives, who has the vision of truth, is full of sweetness. Rasa. And because he is full of sweetness, all around people gather around such a being simply because he is full of that sweetness. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, like bees come to the flower. So he becomes useful to the world just by his search for truth. Because he becomes full of that truth. So such kadwa nahi hota hai from today. Such meetha hota hai. Diabetes nahi create karta hai. लेकिन वो ये वाला सच नहीं होता appearances का सच. Appearances are nothing. It's ever changing in life and they carry a deeper sense which we must find. दूसरा क्या होता है truth के बारे में? What is the next thing about truth? It is rasa, ananda. It is supreme harmony. माँ क्वालिफाई करती है. इट्स नॉट एनी काइंड ऑफ हारमोनी. एक हारमोनी होती है कि लेट्स डू थिंग्स, लेट्स शेक हैंड, जॉइन हैंड्स एंड फॉर द सेक ऑफ हारमोनी. So you join hand with, evil doers, if I may say so. We want harmony. He says, very good. Huh? Next he says, वो elbow भी पकड़ के harmony करते हैं ना. Then he says, आ गले लग जा. Shivaji knew the whole thing. You know this story, no? Shivaji's story. So he had to meet Afzal Khan who had कि दोस्त बन जाते हैं, because he knew he cannot defeat this man. I don't know. So Shivaji said, okay, so we'll meet and celebrate. It's a very famous story. So Shivaji goes there. He knew what this man is capable of. So it is said that in his hands he had put 5 rings, which looked like rings this side, but they were bagnakhas. Very sharp, pointed claws of the lion. And they go meet. This fellow was hiding a dagger. So when they clasp each other, before he can take out the dagger, he had torn his back. That's a famous story. That's where now it has become a hot subject. Where, and this fellow, उसके नाम पर सड़क बनी है, जो धोखा देना चाह रहा था. So he understood that there is a game of deception. Now imagine if Shivaji said, okay, very nice, let's have a bonhomie. We are friends. क्या फर्क पड़ता है? हिंदू मुस्लिम भाई भाई. डीप एसेंस में ट्रू है. बट वो बाहर में, द मोमेंट ए पर्सन सेज आई एम अ हिंदू और अ मुस्लिम, फ्रैंकली, you have defined that deep essence in a certain way. The moment you say I'm a Christian, you have defined it in a certain way. So in manifestation, that's how things operate. The difference is that when you say I am a Hindu, means you are carrying the entire Sanatan Dharma with you. That is the difference. When you say I am a Muslim, you have an identity, you are carrying all that is taught in a certain religion with you. And what is taught there is, you see, Nainital में कल भी देखा, there is only one God and he is Prophet Muhammad. It's written there. अब इंडिया में ये कर सकते हो आप. जाओ सऊदी अरेबिया में लिखो एक ही भगवान है, वो केवल कृष्ण है. देखो क्या होता है उसके बाद. So this is all right. This truth, harmony, that's why she said supreme harmony. So what is supreme harmony? Supreme harmony is when we are all led towards that state where we discover this divine essence. To help each individual and group to discover the divinity which is inherent in everything, then only we can build harmony. Then only true harmony can come. Otherwise we'll have semblances of harmony. So truth is delight, rasa, truth is harmony. So isn't it worth aspiring for? Truth is vastness. Truth is the true vastness. Why? Because this is not a deceptive vastness. This is not an unwrit kind of vastness where you put everything pell-mell together in a waste paper basket and say, we are one. This oneness takes into account that there is a cosmic order. Anything in space and time will create a hierarchy. Anything. Because it will take place step 1, step 2, step 3. Beyond space and time, there is no hierarchy. There is oneness. So in space and time configurations, things are moving from the lower to the higher. This is the essence. So based on that, even our outer conduct, so third level of dharma, before we come to this hierarchy, third level of dharma was in your outer life. So there is the core, there is the inner movement, and there is the outer life. In outer life, things had to be tuned to this truth inside. That also is an expression of dharma. So when you did namaste, it came from that divine presence is within me, divine presence is in you. And all the outer acharan, achar, vyavhar, they all had to sprung from this core. That's how you see many aspects in Indian life came from that. And there are plenty of them, and we need not. And we understood that there are so many beings, forms behind everything. So you had a God for this, God for that, which we have already spoken about. But now we come to this story that everything in life is moving from one state to another. This we all know. Change is the law of life. Nobody can deny it. You don't need to read the Buddha to understand that change is happening. But does this change have a direction and a purpose, or is it just a meaningless change? That's where the rub lies. So, according to Indian thought, this change has a direction. What is the direction? It has sprung from delight, from truth that is delight, and it is moving towards truth and delight. In between, there is all this mixed play, which we can understand, but that's a different story. So, when we understand this, so automatically human life is seen as a journey in Indian thought. What is this journey? Journey from the lower to the higher, lesser to the greater, from the narrow to the vaster. How to undertake this journey? It's an inner journey. And the principle that was used, emphasized in Indian thought, was called Yagya Sacrifice. So there were two ways of undertaking this journey. One was Tyaga and second was Yagya. So what was Tyaga? You leave the step behind if you have to go to the next step. So this leaving behind the step was not a physical act, leave this and take that. It was change the something within us. So therefore, say a corner was holding on to ego, a corner was holding on to desire. You leave it and now engage. So there is a Tyaga. Tyaga and Sannyasa are different. Sannyasa is where you live outwardly. Obviously that has, even if it's a path which we take it, it cannot be for the whole of humanity or large section of humanity. So the emphasis was on Tyaga. Tyaga was always a power that when you renounce the lesser for the sake of the greater. So this Tyaga was a very good policy. So the policy was Tena Tyaktena Bhunchita. You get delight when you do Tyaga. So there was this Sethji who came to a Guruji and he used to give a lot of money. So he wants the Guruji to recognize him. Always he used to have this itch that when everybody is present, Guruji should tell, you are such a great man. So one day Guruji thought, let me give him a little peace of mind. So he said, you are truly a great renunciate. बहुत त्याग किया है तुमने. कान में बोला क्या कहा आपने, क्या कहा? Because he wants everybody to hear, no? अरे बड़े त्यागी हो तुम. अभी उसको सेटिस्फैक्शन नहीं हो रहा है. कहते नहीं, पर आप फॉल्स ह्यूमिलिटी. ट्रू ह्यूमिलिटी इज इनवर्ड. फॉल्स ह्यूमिलिटी नहीं, हमने क्या त्याग किया है दूसरों के सामने. बड़े नमस्ते. ह्यूमिलिटी इज बिफोर द डिवाइन, दैट आई नो नथिंग. That is humility. Humility is not about everybody एकदम bend like लगता है गिरने ही वाले हो अभी आप. That is not humility. That's a show of humility. So he says, आप बताइए ना मैंने क्या त्याग किया है. मुझे तो नहीं पता मैंने कुछ त्याग किया है. So he went on teasing. He said, मेरे से भी बड़ा त्याग किया है तुमने. अब now he is all excited. So he says, Guruji, please tell me. ये तो सच में अब मैं कंफ्यूज हो गया हूँ. आपसे बड़ा मैंने क्या त्याग किया है. He said, देखो 2 घर हैं, 2 कमरे हैं एक घर में. एक में गंदगी भरी है और एक बड़ा सुंदर है. There are 2 rooms in a house. One is full of dirt, muck, and the other is very beautiful. So what I have renounced is, I have renounced that muck wala place, which is full of all the vishtha and wish, which is what much of human life is. Kam, krodh, lobh, moh. And I am living now in this wonderful room where there is fresh air, there is delight, there is beauty. You fellow, you are coming to me for so many decades. Still you are not able to take that room. You still want to hold on to this. So you have renounced this. And you are living here and giving little from there to me. So he says, you are a great renunciate. I am telling you, come to this room, but you are not keen to come. You want to stay in that, so you have chosen to renounce that. So you see, renunciation was always for a greater becoming. Renunciation was, we hold on to a small, little, narrow self-identity. I am this little surface personality, I am this little surface formation. When I renounce it, I become vast. Is it a loss or is it a gain? It was a perfect deal. So the Isha Upanishad reminds us, Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagatyam Jagat. You think it is yours, but actually, it's Lord's. It's meant for the Lord. So, what about me? Tena Tektena Bhunjita. Renounce and enjoy. Enjoy like what? As the Lord enjoys. Tena Tektena Bhunjita. Magrita Kasasvidhanam. You don't have to acquire this, possess that. You enjoy as the Lord enjoys. So it was such a sound. So one was Tyaga. So a Tyagi could fight the war. That's what Shri Krishna tells Arjuna. That now you don't have to think, oh, what will happen to me? I will be stained. People will call me names. I won't get a place in heaven if I engage in war. I'll commit sin. You are full of fear. That's how you start. What a mindset you are caught in. You are full of this sense of fear, sin, all this. Where has all this come into you? It's not about you. Arjuna, why are you putting yourself every time in the center? It's not about you. For God's sake, understand it's about me. How it is about you, Keshava? He says, because I am conducting the affairs of the world. And if your side loses, then the world is going to go down. Do you understand? If ISIS runs over the world, what is going to happen? And you want to say, no, we are all bye-bye. Understand this simple truth. So Arjuna takes the bow. So this is how Indian thought, see, look at it. So one was Tyaga, but there was something else also. It was Yagya. In this journey, you leave the lesser, go forward. Again you move. It's any journey is like that. And it was to leave the lesser form. It was inner change. And you see, in any human life I have seen, when things reach a stalemate situation, okay, very common. You don't know which way to move. There is a Chinese saying, some good things in the China has still survived from Shintoism. Okay. There is a Chinese saying, when you meet a wall, change and pass through. Very profound saying. Change inwardly. And if you change inwardly, you will realize you don't need to change anything outwardly. When people will go to mother and say, I want to change department, I want to change. She said, if you change inwardly, you won't need to change outwardly. And if you don't change inwardly, then you will keep on moving from one kind of change to another. So the change has to come inside. So how to bring this inner change? So that process was Yagya. What does Yagya mean? We see all this havan taking place and people putting ahuti and sometimes say, itna ghee kyun barbaad kar rahe ho bhai? So you get this nice logic. Shuddha hota hai vatavaran. Okay. Agreed, shuddha hota hai. I understand. But there are other ways of doing it. Probably a little better and simpler way. Don't. Those days it was okay. जब इंडिया में घी दूध की नदियां बहती थी तब ठीक है, आपने घी इतना डाल दिया. एज सच लोग बड़े संयमी थे. कोलेस्ट्रॉल लिपिड कंट्रोल में रहने के लिए घी की आहुति दे दो. लेस घी. हाँ, शुद्ध भी होता था. हाँ, तो जो भी है, जब रहेगा नहीं तो लोग मोटे नहीं होंगे, मतलब अच्छी बात थी. बट दैट्स नॉट द पॉइंट. दिस वॉज एन इनर यज्ञ. व्हाट डज इट मीन? So Yagya literally is lighting a fire. First thing you do is you prepare a ground. So you lay the bricks, you prepare a ground. First thing. Yagya ऐसे नहीं कहीं पर भी रख करके आपने शुरू कर दिया माचिस की तिल्ली जला के, या वो आजकल ई यज्ञ होता है, ई मैरिजेस की तरह. वो ऐसा नहीं है. Yagya, light a fire, but you have to make the right spot. So place. So what is that spot? Is the human body. It's revealed, it's there it's not interpretation. It is there in Kathopanishad. It's saying you have to lay the brick in 3 layers. What are the 3 layers? Mind, life, body, they should be ready. Because the moment fire is lit, there will be tap. So people say, I want to do yoga, very good. People come. Sometimes they come to ashram, sometimes. And then, ready? हाँ, यही करना है. And then the moment fire is lit, ये क्या हो रहा है? जल रहा हूं मैं, और क्या? जलोगे नहीं तो शुद्ध कैसे होगे? So yagya is a means of purification. What is meant by purification is not about moral purity again. It's about changing the raw energy into its subtler and higher and more powerful form. All purification is about that. You extract gold by doing this. Anything, you change, you put anything through fire, it changes into something subtler, and by subtler it becomes more powerful. So that is the principle of yagna, that any energy, any movement, any activity of life, when it is put as an ahuti, then it will get purified. So where is that fire? Fire is in the heart, the fire of aspiration. So if you read all the hymns of the Rig Vedas dedicated to fire, and it was called Agni. Agni means ag, that which takes you always forward. Aage badho, aage badho, aage badho. So this Agni, which has to be awakened, takes two forms. One, when we are in ignorance, it takes the form of urge for progress. If urge for progress is not there, one may do all kinds of degrees because one had to ultimately fall back upon earning more money. Urge for progress is a different thing. And in children, that is what has to be awakened. Not classroom marks, urge for progress, thirst for progress. In ignorance, it takes this form. When we become aware, it takes the form of, we can say, divine ascension towards a greater consciousness, higher consciousness, toward the divine. It takes these forms. But in ignorance also this urge is there. It takes the form of urge for progress. If it is there, that means Agni is awakened. And when this Agni is awakened, that means I want to aspire for the divine, then we put an activity into it. We don't destroy it. We purify it and we refine it. When Mother was asked this question, what do we do when human love meets us? Because we are supposed to love only the divine. What should one do? She said, best is to go through it, but go through it as a means of preparation. And then she gives a whole process to learn to love without expectation, without demands, without possessiveness, without jealousies, all those things. If you learn to love truly, that energy will get very much purified within us. And she says, if you discard love, then who knows after how many centuries, because your heart becomes hard. And who knows when it will come eventually. So she said, purify it, refine it. And then she says, if you do it sincerely, you will touch the principle of divine love, which is at the core of everything. And then you discover it's not me loving another, but the divine loving someone, the divine in that person, where they are nothing but two channels, two bodies, two minds, two hearts. And that's how one begins to look at this world. So this is about the energy of love. It applies to everything. Money. How to purify money. Is there something like black money? Yes, for legal purposes it is there. But from the divine purposes, the divine does not make distinction, this is black money or white money. But the wealth can be purified. How do you purify wealth? You purify wealth by putting it to right uses. With sattvic considerations. Not like, okay, कितना आ गया, करोड़ों रुपया आ गया, अच्छा ऐसा करो, वो कोई गौशाला में इतना दान दे दो, एक orphanage. This is unthinking. By all means, think and do it subtly. But that's not how money is, that energy of wealth is purified. The wealth is meant to create beauty, even in outer life. So when you create beauty, of course one can give it to those who need, that's okay. But its purpose is to create beauty in the outer world, to enrich it literally. You see what happens when wealth is not there. You live in a very paltry house, then what happens? If there is wealth and you create beauty inside, it is something wonderful. But if you are creating beauty only with your own thought, your own consideration, then you are not really purifying. So purification is a process through which every energy, knowledge. So, how to purify knowledge? Somebody said very beautifully. First level is information. You distill information, it becomes knowledge. You distill knowledge, it becomes wisdom. So we have to keep on refining, keep on purifying every energy, ambition. Ambition you keep purifying. And eventually it will become the urge to serve the divine. That's how it will happen. Love, ultimately it will change into love for the divine. Because you will discover that divine essence in everything. It will take you to that vast universal love. So this is how, and see, it is such a beautiful thing, it releases you. Because, take again this energy of love. When you love the divine, you receive everything from the divine. And then you love people. You are not expecting anything from them. You are not demanding anything from them. They may or may not respond to you. But see, you are a free person inside. Because you are receiving everything from the divine. You are not wanting, you are not claiming, you are not... But you are still loving. Isn't this state of freedom so beautiful? This is the freedom that they sought. Not the outer freedom, but the inner freedom, which even in outer bonds you are free. And that freedom was called as moksha. When you take any energy, and it could be practiced anywhere in every activity. So we have to turn our life into a conscious sacrifice to the eternal. And it is expressed in several formulas. Look at the eternal aspect of everything, eternal value of everything. Transient, many things will come. They are transient. Learn not to be carried away by that. Look at what will eventually survive at the end of the whole story of human life. Those eternal truths, those eternal moments. Shashvat. So, catch them, hold them. They are the Jama Punji. When we come back, it's not those transient things. They will crash land here. But the eternal values, we have converted the transient things into things of eternal and lasting value by the power of Yagya. So we'll stop here.